Rome burned for days. Flames tore through homes, temples, and marketplaces. Thousands were left dead, homeless, or desperate. And as panic spread through the empire's greatest city, one man stood at the center of it all: Nero. To some, he was a gifted young ruler. To others, he became one of the most hated emperors in Roman history. And after the Great Fire of Rome, Nero would make a decision that helped define his legacy forever. He blamed the Christians. This is the story of Nero, how he rose to power, how Rome descended into chaos, and how one emperor turned fear into persecution. Nero became emperor in 54 AD, when he was just 16 years old. He wasn't born to be Rome's natural ruler. His rise came through family ambition, political manipulation, and imperial power plays. His mother, Agrippina the Younger, was ruthless and determined. She married Emperor Claudius, convinced him to adopt Nero, and helped place her son ahead of Claudius's own biological heir. When Claudius died, under suspicious circumstances, according to some ancient sources, Nero took the throne. At first, things actually looked promising. Early in his reign, Nero was guided by experienced advisors, including the philosopher Seneca and the powerful Praetorian prefect Burrus. In those first years, his rule seemed fairly stable. He reduced some taxes, made public appearances, and was popular with parts of the Roman people. For a moment, it looked like Rome had a young emperor with real potential. But that wouldn't last. As Nero grew more confident, he also grew more dangerous. The young emperor increasingly wanted freedom from anyone who tried to control him, including his own mother. Agrippina had helped put Nero in power, but she also expected to influence him. That became a problem. Eventually, Nero had her killed. The murder of his own mother shocked Rome and revealed what kind of ruler he was becoming. And it didn't stop there. Over time, Nero became more paranoid, more self-indulgent, and more obsessed with his own image. He loved performance, music, and public attention. Nero didn't just want to rule Rome, he wanted to be admired. He wanted applause. He wanted people to see him as an artist, a genius, and a larger-than-life figure. But while Nero performed, Rome watched him with growing unease. Ancient writers describe a ruler who became increasingly cruel, vain, and detached from reality. Some of those accounts may be exaggerated by hostile historians, but there's no doubt Nero's reputation darkened fast. And then came the disaster that would define his reign. In 64 AD, a massive fire broke out in Rome. It began near the Circus Maximus and spread rapidly through the crowded city. Rome was packed with narrow streets, wooden buildings, and tightly built neighborhoods. Once the flames took hold, they were almost impossible to stop. For 6 days, the fire raged. Then it flared up again. By the time it was over, huge sections of Rome had been destroyed. Ancient sources say that only a few districts escaped serious damage. Homes, shops, shrines, and entire communities were gone. People were terrified. They wanted answers. And almost immediately, rumors started to spread. One of the most famous stories is that Nero fiddled while Rome burned. That exact image is obviously impossible. The violin didn't exist yet, but the story reflects how many Romans saw him as a detached ruler while the city suffered. Some sources even claim Nero had started the fire himself. Why would he do that? According to the rumor, he wanted to clear space to rebuild Rome on his own terms and create a grand new palace complex for himself. We can't say for certain that Nero started the fire. Historians still debate it. But whether he caused it or not, a lot of people believed he did. And that made him politically vulnerable. Nero needed someone else to blame. He found his target in a small, unpopular religious group, the Christians. At this point, Christianity was still a small and often misunderstood movement within the Roman world. This was only about 30 years after Jesus had been crucified, so Christianity was still new, fragile, and spreading quietly through the empire. Christians refused to worship the traditional Roman gods. They also refused to treat the emperor as a divine figure. To Roman society, that looked suspicious, even dangerous. Their beliefs were new, strange to outsiders, and easy to twist into rumor. Some Romans viewed them as antisocial. Others thought they were disloyal to the empire. So when Nero needed a scapegoat, Christians were an easy choice. The Roman historian Tacitus, one of the key sources for this period, wrote that Nero blamed the Christians to crush the rumors against himself. Whether every detail in the ancient accounts is accurate or not, the broad point is clear. Nero redirected public anger onto a vulnerable group, and once he did, the persecution turned brutal. Under Nero, Christians were arrested, punished, and publicly executed. Ancient accounts describe horrific scenes. Some Christians were reportedly torn apart by dogs after being covered in animal skins. Others were crucified. Some were even burned alive in public spectacles, allegedly used as human torches to light imperial gardens at night. These punishments weren't just executions, they were theater. That matters because it tells us something about Nero. He didn't simply want order restored, he wanted a public display. He wanted to shift fear, rage, and blame away from himself and onto a hated outsider. This persecution is one reason Nero became such a dark figure in Christian memory. Later, Christian tradition would connect him to the deaths of both Peter and Paul, though the exact details are debated. Still, Nero's name became permanently tied to cruelty, oppression, and the abuse of power. He may have temporarily silenced rumors, but he didn't solve the deeper problem. His rule was still collapsing. After the fire, Nero began rebuilding Rome, and some of those rebuilding efforts were actually practical. He introduced wider streets and stricter building standards to reduce the risk of future fires. But he also built the Domus Aurea, the Golden House, a massive, luxurious palace that seemed to confirm everyone's worst suspicions about him. While ordinary Romans suffered, Nero looked like a man focused on himself. Then came more pressure. Political unrest, financial strain, and rebellion in the provinces. Support began to break apart. Even people around Nero started abandoning him. By 68 AD, the situation was over. The Senate declared Nero a public enemy. He fled Rome. And with nowhere left to turn, the emperor who had once ruled the Roman world took his own life. He was only 30 years old. According to tradition, his final words were something like, "What an artist dies in me." That line says a lot. Even at the very end, Nero seemed obsessed with his own image. Not with Rome, not with the people he ruled, with himself. Nero's story is one of the clearest examples of what happens when power, ego, and fear collide. He began as a young emperor with promise. But over time, he became a ruler, remembered for paranoia, spectacle, and brutality. And after the Great Fire of Rome, instead of calming the empire or taking responsibility, he turned to blame. He targeted a vulnerable minority and used suffering as political cover. That decision made Nero infamous, not just as a failed emperor, but as a symbol of what tyranny looks like when a ruler values his own survival more than truth. And that's why, nearly 2,000 years later, people still remember his name.